Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. I want to talk about turning a small amount of money into a large amount of money. We are going to buy one property, and we're going to buy the property in a nice area. Although you can make a lot of money buying fixer-uppers, this time we want a turnkey property. And one of the reasons I'm making this video is for those of you who do not want the hassle of buying a fixer-upper and then having to hire tradespeople to help you do the repairs. When I started out as a software engineer in Silicon Valley, when I bought my first property, I knew nothing about properties. My wife and I had been out of college for right about 2 years, maybe a little less than 2 years at that time. We were renting. We were living in an apartment in Silicon Valley, and I was watching late night TV, and I saw a bunch of real estate seminars being advertised as they were back in those days. And I got interested in that because of the investment opportunity, the chance to make money. I had a little bit of money set aside, so I bought my first property. I knew nothing about didn't know what I was doing, and it was pretty difficult because of that. So this video, I want to talk about avoiding the hassle of the fixer-upper, how to make a lot of money buying a turnkey property in a nice area that's not a fixer-upper. So we want one of the two things when we buy this property. We want good terms, or we want a low entry price. Again, if you're buying your first property, it's cool to try to get great terms from the seller if you can, or to have a low entry price. So what do I mean by terms? What I mean by terms is sometimes sellers will carry at least for 12 months, carry a first loan for 12 months if you put down, say, 5%. So on say a $2 million property, 5% down would be $100,000, right? So that may not be possible for everybody, but if you're buying your first property and other people are, friends and or family are getting involved in helping you buy it, you can make that work. If you live in a different part of the country, different from Silicon Valley, the entry price, the selling price is going to be lower, unless it's New York, some parts of Arizona, Texas, other states, prices are higher. But we want to try to get the seller to carry the first loan for 12 months, and we put down 5%. For 1 year, we're going to save up the rent that we take in as income for a down payment. And then at the end of that year, we will refinance and pay off the seller from that first loan. I have done that, okay? I've done that with one property I bought several years ago, and the seller was willing to carry the first loan as long as I put down some kind of down payment. They just wanted to get rid of the property, basically. So here's the other option, a low entry price. If you're a first-time home buyer, and what that means is if you're like we were when we started out, if you're living in an apartment and you have not lived in a property that you owned for at least 2 years, the first-time home buyer status renews itself. Now, if you've been living in a property that you own within the past 2 years, then you don't qualify for the first-time home buyer status. But if you do, you can get loans for 3% down payment, which is really doable in most markets. If you're a veteran, if you've done a stint in the military, you can get a veteran's loan, 0% down. That's a killer deal, especially if you're going to be buying in a nice area. This is a great way to start if you can make this work, or with the seller carry. So we're going to avoid marginal areas of town. We're going to buy in a nice area, and here's why. Properties in a nice part of town are easier to rent because people want to live in a nice area. They want to feel safe. There are usually better school systems. So when you have rental property, you have people who want to rent. Sometimes they have children who are attending schools. So nice parts of town have a better school system generally. Also, the rents you can charge are higher. I misspelled higher. I forgot the H, but I meant rents higher there. The cap rate is usually lower in a nice area. And that might sound counterintuitive why that would be good, but it is. And I'll explain why when we get to a certain point in this discussion here. So also, in a downturn, when there's an economic cycle and there's a slowing in the economy, very few people in nice properties will move out. Generally, someone who wants to live in a nice area has their act together economically. They have a decent career, and just because the economy is a little slow, they're not just going to move out. In a marginal area, completely different story. I have owned and operated both in nice areas and in marginal areas, and I can tell you that when the economy gets slow, no one is going to move out from a nice area. And even if they do, It's easier to rent if you're operating in a nice part of town with great schools. Also, when it comes time to sell, if you're owning and operating in a nice area, that property is going to be easier to sell than a property in a marginal area. Okay, so what I found a 4-unit property in a fantastic area. This is the address, 77 Greendale Way, San Jose, California. If you look online right now, that property is listed for sale. So the property makeup is it has one 3-bedroom, 2-bath unit, renting for $3,500 a month. I'll explain these numbers in a minute. The other 3 units, there's 3 2-bed, 1-bath units, each rent for $3,000 a month. Now, depending on the part of the country you're in, you might look at those rents and say, wow, $3,000 for a 2-bedroom, 1-bath? It's Silicon Valley. San Jose is the capital city of Silicon Valley. That's where all the high-tech companies are. So, and these rents are the average. What I did is I looked in this area where the property is. There was a range of $2,000 to $4,000 that I saw for 2-bedroom, 1-bath units. 3,000 is right in the middle. So I just stuck with 3,000. The rents in that area for 3-bedroom, 2-bath units kind of range between like 2,500 to 44 or 4,500. So this is in the middle, right between those two. So I'm going to go with these numbers for now, because if I'm buying the property and I don't really know anything about it, I want to at least convince myself that if I charge them the average of what everyone else is charging in that market, I will be able to get them rented. So I'm giving you these numbers because we're going to have to figure out what to offer this seller, and we need to know the rents to do that. So one of the things about this property, it's in the Cupertino School District. So Cupertino is an award-winning school district in Silicon Valley. I mean, it's a cut above. It's pretty astonishing how highly rated and coveted those schools are, the Cupertino School District. So this property, despite the fact that it has a San Jose city address, it's geographically, physically close enough to Cupertino that people who live in this property will attend Cupertino schools. So that is a really cool thing. I mean, not only is it in a nice part of San Jose, but it's got access to the Cupertino school system. So that's a strong point. So what should our offer be? So we know what the rents are. I'm using very conservative numbers, the middle of the range rents for those units in this area, in this part of San Jose. Let's figure out the asking price. I'm sorry, the price we should offer. So I'm going to start with the cap rate, the standard cap rate calculation. All right. Cap rate is calculated as net operating income of a property annually, the net operating annual income divided by what the seller sells the property for, the selling price, which in our case will be our purchase price. So the net operating income, which we're going to calculate here in a second, divided by the selling price equals the cap rate. So I looked in this area and I saw cap rates right around 5% plus or minus. So I'm going to go with 5% cap rate for this property. So the cap rate 5% equals the net operating income divided by the selling price. So we can figure out the selling price because we're going to determine the net operating income from the rents. So we have one $3,500 unit plus three $3,000 units. The monthly rent, gross rent, is $12,500 a month. That's a gross annual rent of $150,000 per year. So this is a fourplex, and depending on what part of the country you're in, you might think 150 grand for a fourplex in annual gross rents. Yes. And remember, those are conservative numbers. The rents could be higher. I'm just trying to be conservative with the amount that I'm going to offer on this property. Okay? So $150,000 a year gross rent, 30% expenses, right? So we're not going to keep all of that. We're going to have 30% expenses on the property over that year, and 70% remains for us. So we're going to take 70%, 0.7 times the gross annual rent. Our net operating income is $105,000 per year. Now, we have the net operating income. We have the cap rate, which is 5%. So we can now figure out the purchase price, because the purchase price, also known as the selling price, is this: 5% cap rate equals the net operating income, $105,000 divided by the purchase price. So we're going to pull the purchase price this way, and just a little algebra, obviously, and the 5% goes in the denominator. The purchase offer price we should make is $105,000 divided by 0.05, $2,100,000. And again, depending on what part of the country you're from, you might say, I'd never pay $2,100,000 for a fourplex. Yes, you would. You definitely would. And I'll show you why. This is Silicon Valley properties. You just have to get used to the higher numbers depending on what part of the country you're in. Now, the seller has an asking price of $2,500,000. We are going to have to ask why. Because although I said this is Cupertino Schools, It's not a Cupertino mailing address. It's a San Jose mailing address. So the seller might know something we don't know. And so we want to be reasonable and rational when we deal with the seller and ask them why they're asking such a higher price. Maybe this is a negotiating ploy. Maybe they're trying to get more than the property is actually worth. But here's the cool thing about this. If we can get the seller to give us good terms, you know, we don't even really care too much about a higher selling price. We can go to the seller and say, look, you're asking kind of a high selling price. If you will give us good terms, then we can agree to your selling price. The seller might just take you up on that. If they say no, then you have to figure out if there's any negotiating room in that selling price. And what you can do, and I described this in another video, is you can hire a foundation inspectors, and I'm not talking about a home inspector company. I'm talking about someone who is a licensed foundation expert, someone who has a contractor's license for foundations in that state, to do an inspection of the foundation. You can hire a licensed electrician or electrical company, electrical contractor, to do an inspection of the electrical system. You know, the breaker panel, the wiring, the fixtures inside and outside the house. You can hire a plumbing contractor to do a plumbing inspection. And you will then take those reports, and usually there are some things that are going to be wrong. This is an older property. I looked online. This is built in the, I think, mid-70s or mid-60s. So you're bound to find some issues with something to use as a negotiation tactic with the seller. So this video is how to take a small amount of money and turn it into a lot of money. So in both of these options, the way we're going to buy this property, we're either going to get good terms with 5% down, or we're going to have a low entry price with 3% or 0 down, right? So how do we turn that into big money? So I have a video, I have 2 videos actually, that walk you through this process of how to make this into well over $1 million in fairly short order. The 2 videos are on my channel. I posted these a couple days ago. Getting rich the slow or fast way, to learn the exact procedure to get rich starting with just one property. But in this case, the cool thing about this, and the reason I want to make this video, is if you're starting out and you do not want the hassle of a fixer-upper, and you don't want to have to deal with tradespeople and figuring out how to remodel a property, we're buying a property in a nice area that's kind of in a turnkey situation, so we don't have to do any work. And so these 2 videos will explain, again, they're on my channel, Getting Rich the Slow Way or the Fast Way. I've got a series of 2 videos, one that's kind of exciting, and then the second one that I made the next day is pretty astonishing what you can do with starting with just one property. So that's sort of the strategy here. We're going to buy in a nice area for several reasons, and we're going to either get good terms or a low entry price. And then if you watch those 2 videos, we're going to make this property, we're going to become multimillionaires from this one property, starting with this one property. And with a very low, entry, it's a very gratifying thing to have a long-term plan while you're working. Because the cool thing about this is, since we're not buying a fixer-upper, you have your day job. You can keep your day job because you're not going to have to do any work. All you're going to have to do is keep the units rented. And because this is in a nice area, it's very easy to rent, especially with Cupertino schools. If you look online, the Cupertino School District, it's a very highly rated school system. So if you have any questions about this process, please post in the comments. Also, if you have any recommendations for the whiteboard, I'm trying to think if this is the best use of this space. One of the, I thought of a couple of other options, a way to present the information, but I'd really like to hear suggestions if anyone has any. I sort of like this approach because it sort of lays everything out, and it's sort of like a Trader Joe's a flyer. You get those flyers and you go to Trader Joe's and they're kind of handwritten sort of way. So it's kind of interesting for that. But if people have other suggestions, please let me know. And be sure to see those other 2 videos on my channel, Getting Rich the Slow Way or the Fast Way, to know how to, after you buy this thing, how to turn this into millions over time. Obviously, when you're buying a property in a nice area, this is a long-term hold, especially with that school district. This is not a flip. This is a 10-year, 20-year, maybe lifetime hold of this property. You really want to take advantage of the fact that we're not buying in a marginal area, and we're not buying a fixer-upper. We're buying a turnkey property in a great area. So any questions, please post in the comments. And I very much appreciate you guys watching. And if you have any questions, let me know, and have a great day.